Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast live on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. I'm your host, Andrew Musgrove, and I'm joined, as you can see, by Mark Douglas. Plenty to talk about in the world of Newcastle United. We have the statement from the club last week as well as the transfer window, and we'll go through Mark's analysis of all of that in a moment. But today, there's been a little company's house update, Mark, and certain people on Twitter are getting a little bit excited about it. It's more in hope than expectation. And what I'll do, I'll just explain to you guys who are watching and listening what's happened, and then we'll talk a bit about it. So essentially, as I say, company's house update with the NC UK Investment Limited company, which was linked to the Newcastle United takeover. There's been a new principal office address added to the details and a new entity details as well, which is catching people's eye. It's now been listed as a corporation sole, whereas before it was listed as the Public Investment Fund, i.e. a company. There's been no change in the officers, so Al Romani would remain listed. And there's a lot of questions about what it means, Mark. I mean, I have a little look on Google and on Company's House to see if we can delve into it. And the definition of corporation sole is an individual person who represents an official position which has a single separate legal entity. I mean, it is all business jargon. We're no experts on this. There is a lot of excitement from certain quarters. I guess, Mark, though, the important bit about this is the date that it was actually submitted to Company's House, which was the 16th of July. Arbitration was officially delayed on the 20th of July. So you look at them dates and you would say, well, whatever this potentially means, I mean, it could just be housekeeping. It's probably been maybe, and, it's just maybe rendered insignificant because of the fact arbitration has been delayed until early 2022, and that was announced 4 days after this was submitted to Company's House.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've been through a lot of the sort of Company's House updates over the best part of 2 years. It's significant. If you're going to talk about significance, is I suppose that vehicle is being maintained. It's basically to bring it in line with other entities that the Public Investment Fund have in the UK. So the investment arm that invested in the McLaren racing team, same thing the other week. I mean, I'm assuming it's a legal thing. It's if it was specifically for the Newcastle United takeover, probably you wouldn't see it. Maybe I don't think in some of those other businesses. And as you said, it did happen quite a while ago. So as far as I'm concerned, the important thing is really that we're no further forward in terms of the actual takeover happening, because the arbitration in the CAT case both still scheduled for either next year or next month, and arbitration is the key to getting things through. I mean, I think in a kind of I think there's a lot of people would like somebody to sort of change the structure of the PIF to enable a fast track process for the takeover to happen. But obviously, it doesn't work that way, because any individual that was going to take a controlling interest in Newcastle United would have to go through the owners and directors test, and nobody who's listed in this as part of NC UK would have the kind of wealth of the PIF. So I don't really know whether that's possible. Obviously, it's something that people are speculating on, but I think we have to be honest and say that there's nobody really at this point knows what it means for the takeover, other than maybe the people involved. And look, I will say that we haven't heard anything from PIF for a long time. There's all sorts of speculation around arbitration as well, that whether they was involved in the bid as they have been previously. Obviously, we know Amanda Staveley and her consortium are desperately trying to push it through, but obviously you need PIF there as well. I think we all need to get on with our lives a little bit. In the meantime, obviously, Company's House updates is a quiet week because there's no match happening at the moment. It's let's speculate about it and look at it. But anybody sort of sitting there saying that this is the next step to the takeover happening is kind of ignoring the big elephant in the room, which is that obviously arbitration still has to happen, and that's scheduled for early next year. I wouldn't surprise me if there are things going on behind the scenes. There are always things going on behind the scenes in these situations. But there might also be other parties currently looking at Newcastle United. I think we have to be in the here and now. A statement went out last week from Newcastle United about what they were doing, made clear why they were doing what they were doing. No mention of a takeover there. It was very much the club is operating as business as usual at the moment. And I think, look, if you want to put yourself through it again, go through the whole situation of what it might mean, and the hashtag cans and all this business. If you want to do that and you are happy sort of going through it, then fine. Obviously, I would say the one thing that I think is obviously, these shell companies get closed if there's no chance of any takeover happening. The fact that shell company filed accounts or filed accounts this year, and obviously there are changes to it. It could just be they could just get rid of it. That is the point. So I think it obviously suggests that there's obviously still some hope there at some point, but it's not an expensive thing to do to change these things. And I would think that probably whoever it is just doing that across all bodies. But like, I'm not somebody, I can't give you the inside expertise. The only thing I know is from the last few weeks when I checked, nothing had really changed, and it was very much all looking towards arbitration and all looking towards obviously the CAT case that's coming up. I wrote on Saturday, that there are, obviously the longer this goes on and the longer it goes on without certainty, that the more likely that it is that it's going to be difficult to keep PIF involved. And they may end up going and investing elsewhere. But for me at the moment, the prospect of an immediate takeover feels feels like a kind of fairly distant prospect, to be honest, at the moment, and we need to kind of deal with the here and now. But I understand it's great escapism on a very quiet Tuesday.
Yeah, you mentioned there we all kind of need to move on. It would be a lot easier to move on if there was some positivity happening with the current owners and the current first team squad. You mentioned there the statement, Mark, which dropped last week, and even after all these days that's gone on since that statement has dropped, I'm still gobsmacked just looking through the contents of it. I don't even know really where to start to get your view on some of the kind of the things that were put across by the club. Is there anything, first of all, that stands out for you, which you want to address first of all, and then I'll pick on a few points?
Well, I think what, for me, I can't wait is for Friday to see Steve Bruce's reaction to it. Now, I think we all know that he's not going to go into battle with the hierarchy. It's not really his style. He is an employee of the club, so I can't see him criticising the club per se. But it's notable, really, that it felt to me, although it was aimed, I think it was aimed a little bit at some of the ways that we'd reacted to the transfer window. And I think there was always going to be an element of answering back to some of the media reports, but it felt pretty clear to me that it was aimed at anybody who'd said that Steve Bruce was unhappy with the way that the last few days of the window had gone. And it almost felt like a little bit of a challenge to him to say, look, you knew exactly where we were. You were part of all those conversations. We got Joe Willock in. We weren't expecting to do that. You knew what was happening. You knew what was coming after that. And for me, it very much felt like a bit of a, I wouldn't say it was a slap down to Steve Bruce, but anybody who was going to say Steve Bruce didn't know the position they were in, it was almost like, well, he did, and we did really well to get Joe Willock in. It was what we weren't expecting to do that, and that was above and beyond what we expected to do. It was very much, didn't have a name on it, but it felt very much like Charlie to me. I sat in his office and listened to the briefing. We weren't a million miles away from what he said in that statement, but it was all there for you. So for me, the first thing was the Steve Bruce thing. It felt like that was very much a message that went for Steve Bruce. Secondly, it was restating really what we know that they say, which is that we can't spend any more than we get in, and no money's come in for the last year. So that's where we are. You can poke a lot of holes in it. For me, it felt like very much typical of Newcastle at the moment, a very cold statement, and then at the end sort of saying we'll get behind us because we're better when we're all together, but you've got to earn that. Talk of ambition, things like that. For me, it feels a bitter pill to swallow when you know that the ambition really at Newcastle United, as long as this owner is in charge and as long as we're in the situation we're in, is just to stay in the Premier League, and I think that really isn't good enough.
Yeah, you mentioned there. So in the statement, it's said our commitment to being run in a sustainable manner which secures financial viability on the club is a long-standing one. This does not come at the expense of being ambitious, and it is built on the core principle that we spend what we have. And quite rightly, a lot of fans turned around and said, what ambition are you talking about here? Because under Mike Ashley, we've seen, was it 2 relegations? We had that 5th place finish. But other than that, Newcastle have really been a side that just looks to avoid relegation. And the club quite rightly criticised for that part where they did mention ambition.
Well, it's not a stated aim, obviously, to stay in the Premier League. And they do talk about ambition, and it's been the one thing I think that's cheesed them off over the last few years is that when people say, "Oh, you're only interested in staying in the Premier League," because they sort of say, "Well, we're not. We have we have ambitions. We want to cut run all these things." But there's a difference between saying it and what you actually do, and actually having an objective, a mission to try and get better. It doesn't necessarily have to be throwing money at the football club. You look at Brentford, for example, and the way that they've improved year on year. There was some initial investment, but really, similar to Leicester as well. Obviously, did have some initial investment as well. If you sell your best players and reinvest that money in smart recruitment, you can try and grow, and you might not even have to invest. What Newcastle United aren't doing at the moment is even thinking differently and trying to do things differently. We saw a slew of kind of contract renewals that happened at Newcastle United, where I think that was more for me indicative of anything that they did and anything that the statement says. That told you where they are, which is protect what we've got, try and stay in the Premier League. We don't think that we'd rather renew Dwight Gale's contract for 3 years than sell him or let him go and invest in something that may or may not make us better, but we know it might be a bit of a risk, but we know there's a chance that we're going to improve. There's no chance to improve when you bring back the same players every year and then not adding significantly to them. This is the same team that ended, the same squad that ended last season, and they ended last season well, but is there enough there to take them forward? Clearly, in my opinion, not. To say that they only spend what they bring in, that's not actually true, because the seasons when they have got relegated, Mike Ashley has bankrolled recruitment sprees. We know that because he did it under Rafa Benitez, and I've always wondered why. Clearly with Joe Willock, they bent the rules to bring him in. So why couldn't there be something else along those lines? Why couldn't they spend some of the TV money that's coming in over the course of the year? Because that's what other clubs in the Premier League have done. Now they would say, well, we're risking, and I don't think there's a problem with self-sustainability, but when it's done the way that Newcastle do it, and there's been no investment spend for a long time at Newcastle, they are one of the only clubs, and there's only 3 clubs in the Premier League that don't have a director of football and don't have expanded kind of football board as well. Their recruitment is, it feels a little bit haphazard to me. You've got Steve Nixon going and bringing in Rodrigo Vilca, Santiago Munez, but then Steve Bruce wanting to bring in domestic-based players. It's like, what is the plan? What is the overall plan at Newcastle United? And we don't know, and they don't tell us what it is generally. Obviously they've released this statement, but they don't really sell the vision at all. There probably isn't vision, really, in my opinion. There's no vision of what they are. So I thought the statement was, I know there was always going to be a bit of outreach around it. It told us exactly where they are as a football club, for better or worse, and we know now where they are. And it doesn't really change anything for me. I kind of, much like most of us, made my opinion of the current hierarchy's thinking known a long time ago, and nothing that they've done really since then has changed it. If anything, I think they've got more insular in the last few years. I would say, look, we've demanded something from them. This is something. I don't agree with it, but it is something. I suppose that's the only thing that I would say is positive about it, because the actual content of it doesn't really feel like it moves us any further.
It's a sad state, though, isn't it, when we're complimenting or praising for want of a better phrase, the club for actually releasing a statement when really you look around the Premier League and clubs just do that on a normal basis. And it's frustrating, I think, for journalists, but it's more frustrating for fans who just want to know what's going on with their club.
Well, I mean, these kind of things matter when the team are losing games or they're not progressing. Obviously, look, we've just had a situation where Manchester United's fans have been in outrage on the pitch, stopping games from taking part, and now they've just had a transfer window where it feels like those concerns have definitely been pushed to the back burner. So not to criticise them, but if Newcastle United were doing better and they kind of like were bringing the results, probably those kind of things wouldn't matter as much. In my opinion, I think they are important because they build the idea that football club is connected to its fans and it's connected to its people and it's moving in the right direction. And I think you don't get one without the other, in my opinion. But let's be honest, those kind of things matter more because the team aren't winning. And I think it just shows what a mess the club's in, really, because for you have to do that after a transfer window says it all. But I just felt, last Tuesday was just so familiar. I just didn't feel there was any, I couldn't even muster myself to get angry, really, because it just happens so often with Newcastle. And I think what we've added to the last mix is, we go back to the takeover thing. It felt more acute because we were so close to being in a different position. But unfortunately, that's been wrestled away from us, and we don't know where it's going next. And probably why you've got people looking at Company's House and hoping that something might happen there, because there really, as you said, isn't that much happening on the pitch. And we've just got to hope that they do sort of start to put a few results together. I think they can. I think the team's squad is good enough, but there's a bit of debate over where Callum Wilson might play on Saturday, and I think that really tells you everything you need to know. What do they have behind that first 11, especially forward, especially striking wise? They don't have much, and for them to then come out with the statement they did shows, I think, what Rafa Benitez always said, which is decisions at Newcastle United are not made for football reasons, and Steve Bruce is finding that out to his cost.
It certainly is. I just want to talk about the bit where obviously talks about Joe Willock's arrival and how the usual approach is to pay fees up front, but they changed their approach to get Joe Willock in. We are beyond delighted to have secured him. And they're kind of saying, look, we've broken the rules here to do that. So it's kind of like they want some gratitude. And you say, okay, actually you've gone out and you've got Joe Willock. I didn't think they were going to do that, but they've done that. But on the other hand, that's just what football clubs should be doing. They should be pushing to improve. And I get the whole self-sustainability, and it'll be good for when a buyer does come along because they'll look at the books and it'll be in a good position. But it's a massive gamble because this could backfire because you've only brought in one player to improve the squad. We know, like mentioned there, forward, Steve Bruce wanted a midfielder, he wanted a centre back. We know the improvements are needed all over the park. So you can say, look, we've moved the goalpost to get him in. We want to be self-sustainable, but come May, it might have all backfired.
Well, and that's always the problem with the approach that Newcastle United have gone for, is that are they going to be in January scrambling around for a striker, scrambling around for somebody to play midfield, that kind of the Hamza Chowdhury role that Steve Bruce has been desperate to bring somebody in for. I think if you've got two loan players in, he might have sat back and said, actually, we have quite well in this window. He hasn't got that in, and you say they are short in areas, and we know that injuries happen. Callum Wilson had 2 last season. He's already had a little one this year. I think Callum Wilson, I don't think he tends to miss a lot of games. He will miss a few games. Alan Saint-Maximin misses games. He's done that the last 2 seasons. What do they have behind that first 11? It's like you said, okay, yes, they bent the rules to get Joe Willock, but why do you have to have the situation that Newcastle United have got where you have to pay for your fees up front? If it's not working, if other clubs are doing it differently and they're advancing on you, then you have to think differently. And for me, it looks to me like, yes, sustainability is absolutely something that they should be admired for. But if sustainability, as you said, comes at the cost of putting their Premier League position in peril, then it's a false, to me, it just doesn't feel like it should work. And I think that for me has always been the issue at Newcastle. Not enough people thinking about football and thinking about actually the athletic achievements that the football club should be doing, and too many people thinking about sustainability and the financial aspects of it. You can do both. Benitez always said you can do both. There are ways and means of doing it. And Newcastle, unfortunately, are quite, I think, set in their thinking. And the frustration is that it's not going to change. They've had so many chances to learn the lessons, and I don't think for me it is going to change it. Sorry, I've just got to say one thing there. I made a few inquiries about that. Had Kieran Maguire get back to me, obviously, really well known for basketball, and he said he thinks that company's house it is spectacularly dull and doesn't really do much. So I don't like to burst anybody's balloon and stuff. He did say he thinks it's spectacularly dull. So let's hope not. But Kieran does tend to know these things.
Just on Joe Willett there, when I read that bit of the statement, I thought, goodness me, there's no pressure on the lad now, because it's been made abundantly clear that you're the reason that we haven't got any more signings in.
Yeah. And look, the alternative that Newcastle were looking at, I think the thing with Willock is it's very much like we knew in the summer that really Steve Bruce was pushing for Joe Willock, and if he got Willock, it was going to be very much that's the budget, and he made the case. I mean, I think I wrote a couple of pieces in the summer saying, there is no budget at Newcastle United. There's never a transfer budget. It's very much a case by case basis, and that was always the case. He went and got Willock, and I think if he hadn't got Willock and he'd got somebody else, he probably could have got the two loan signings. He probably could have got somebody else, but Willock was the man he wanted, felt he could come in. Like last summer, it was a no-risk strategy. He wanted to bring in players who he felt would hit the ground running, and that's exactly what he feels with Joe Willock. Unfortunately, with Willock, he's not had much of a pre-season, didn't play much. It was left relatively late in the day to actually bring him in. And obviously they didn't get him over the line in time to play the first game either. So he's got a bit of catching up to do. And I also don't think, that he will ever have a run like he had at the end of last season where he was scoring all those goals. Remember, he didn't play all those games. He was coming on as a sub for some of them. He's a young player. He's not played a lot of games. There'll be inconsistencies as well. I mean, they're going to build a team around him. They're going to build a midfield around him. So, that's why he's here, really, because he fancies that chance. Like you said, a lot of pressure on him. For Newcastle not to bring anybody in on loan, I think is the problem. We knew that there was not a lot of money. We knew what Newcastle do, but they are actually effectively saying as well there wasn't even enough money to bring anybody in on loan. Are they also saying that there's not the money there to, sack the manager and pay the compensation? Well, we know that Newcastle aren't going to sack Steve Bruce unless it gets absolutely dire. So maybe we are in that situation where, the money's so tight that they can't even do that. But to me, that feels, they've come out and explained it in the statement, but, they will be getting money from the TV deals. They'll now be getting revenue in from having fans back in the ground as well. So it seems to me very, a rigid way of thinking that isn't going to benefit them.
Just the final question on this statement. I'll just read the final paragraph out because I know it did cause a bit of a stir. So, having finished last season in 12th place in the Premier League and in the top 6 of the form table over the final 9 fixtures, the club at all levels maintains a strong belief in this current squad. We have a talented and committed group of players who have shown they are fully capable of delivering, and we ask all our loyal supporters to get behind the team because we are stronger together. Now, I mean, it was a good finish to the last season, but that does kind of rub away the middle part of the season, which was absolutely dreadful. A lot of people, including myself, look, there's a decent enough squad there, but I don't think it's going to be a comfortable season. I think they may struggle. If Wilson gets injured, if Alan St. Maximin gets injured, or they get marked out of the game, lack of form, it's going to be difficult. And then the final bit, we ask all our loyal supporters to get behind their team. I don't know about you, Mark, but do you sense a little bit of worry from the hierarchy? Maybe they've seen the attendances dropping. They maybe know what's coming they get beat off Manchester United, and then you've got that Leeds game at home, and they could see, a significant drop in attendance numbers even further?
I don't think they're necessarily worried, because I don't know whether I think they've always looked at the noise as kind of outside noise, and we ignore it. We just get on with what we do. I think they've always felt like that. But they will start to pay attention if the seeds of what we saw against Southampton start to become a kind of mutiny. It's going to be very difficult to ignore that, and I think maybe that's what that is a message for. It feels to me like the whole statement is very much like, look, we need to go when they say we're stronger together. Again, is that another little message for Bruce there? Because there clearly has been some stuff said in that in at the end of the window about how he would be frustrated. He expected a bit more. He was working on deals, etc., etc. To me, it felt like that is a message for Bruce. It's a message for him, but it's also a message for supporters and some of them who aren't happy with what's going on at the moment. And I don't think they get it. I don't think they understand why people feel fed up with the football club. They feel they can't win. Fans feel that this lot can't win either, and it's just an unhappy situation at the moment. And you've got Steve Bruce in the middle of it, an unpopular manager, not winning games. It feels to me like a recipe for a trouble. It's going to get nasty very quickly if they lose to Manchester United. They play Leeds on a Friday night. That, for me, has the feeling of something that could be potentially very, very nasty for the club if they lose that game as well, because you could be getting into the end of September, losing to a team they should win. They should be getting something from in that situation. And I think that, for me, is the worry. I don't think attendances have been okay, but the atmosphere at the games has been powder cake. It's been on a knife edge, and that is going to affect players. It clearly is going to affect players down the line. It's difficult to play in those kind of atmospheres.
Well, we saw the chance, or heard the chance rather, against Southampton. Did you think that was a turning point, or do you think that it was maybe expected from certain sections of fans, given we know how certain sections feel about Steve Bruce, given the lack of signings and given the fact that he is the public face of Newcastle United? Because other than this statement with no name to it, no one else comes out and helps him out.
Yeah, I mean, if they didn't expect it, then they were being naive, really. I think they underestimate the amount of frustration that there was last season with the way that the team were playing at their peril. It had fans been in the ground when they were playing like that and losing those games. I think it would have been almost untenable for Steve Bruce. I do remember Alan Pardew having a situation where he was booed and he couldn't actually come out of the dugout because he felt it would have made things worse. I think the situation last season was, there was so much anger about the way that the team played, but then they did have a really good end to the season. They did start to play in a more attacking way, so it held off a bit of that. But I don't think they've helped themselves by the way that some of the stuff that Steve Bruce has said hasn't helped him. Some of the stuff that's been around the club hasn't helped anybody either. And I just think that he's been left hanging a little bit by the hierarchy as well, because they need to get and support him. They need to get out and start talking and start giving reasons for what they do. I think obviously they've done through this statement, but it's not the same really. They need Lee Charnley out there giving reasons for what's happened, and they need to be doing those kind of things. I feel like the hierarchy is kind of, a lot of them checked out. They want to sell on. They want to bring in people with new ideas and direction, but they just haven't been able to do that, and that has created a big problem as well. So we'll see. You never know. At Newcastle United, it's always a roller coaster, isn't it? It feels terrible at this stage. Hey, if they go to Manchester United and get something, and Manchester United weren't particularly good against Wolves and were very poor against Southampton. Ronaldo, I don't think he's barely, he's only started training with them today. Is he going to be ready to go? You can start to build the narrative around that game where Newcastle United go in as firm underdogs and maybe get something out of it. They've actually played okay at Manchester United the last two times they've been there. They've lost both games, but probably should have got something out of it. So can they get something? If they start to string results together, these kind of things get forgotten. But I have to say, at the moment, I am worried.
Stephen Locke asks Mark whether you think they might sign a free agent, and do you think if they get to January and they need some investment, whether there will be a budget there, given that the TV installments coming in around that time or just after?
There will be a free agent coming in. They've already got the squad. Will be kind of named. I think they're going to bring in 4. They're going to have 4 goalkeepers. So, but there are some decent free agents out there. But whether or not, I mean, I don't think they'll be looking to bring any of those in. It's very rare that Premier League clubs do these days. There are some good free agents out there. I like one or two of them. A couple of them who used to play for Newcastle as well. Budget in January, yeah, there will be some money there. Potentially for loan signings. Obviously, there will be. I think in the statement it said cash flows are, not necessarily kind of recognised by a lot of fans, but when the money comes in, is not the same as having it. It doesn't all come in one instalment. So yeah, I think there will be some kind of budget in January. We just have to hope that they get to January and they're in a half decent situation, because at the moment, obviously they've only got 1 point from possible 9. Got a tough game coming up, and before the next international break, I was just having a look there. They've got games that really they need to start picking up points from, because they've got Leeds, Watford, and Wolves as the next 3 after Manchester United. And if they're still sat here without a win, you really would start to worry for them, because after that it does start to get harder. They have Spurs, Chelsea. They have games where they need to start winning. Really, they've got 3 coming, one after the other, after the Manchester United game. And really, for me, those are very important games. They need to get at least sort of 4 points out of that possible 6 to keep their heads above water.
Penultimate question then. You mentioned earlier in the show the arrival of Santiago Munez. What do you know about him? Is there genuine hope he could break into the first team sooner rather than later, or do you think this is a long-term project?
Well, it's a bit like Rodrigo Vilca, isn't it? He came in and, I was speaking to people around him over the summer, and, I think at one point they felt he should stay at Newcastle because he wasn't a million miles away from the first team squad. But I think what worries me slightly about these signings is obviously it's Steve Nickson doing the kind of like a lot of the work around these signings. How much, how realistic is it for them to go and bring him in, be in the first team, within 12 to 18 months, when you've got a player like Elliot Anderson, who's really highly rated, been training the first team for a long time, who couldn't get in the team last season. So, they're bringing them in at kind of 7, well, I think 19. Vilca was 21. They're not young players. At the age of 19, 20, 21, you need to be playing games. So, it's really interesting, and I kind of applaud them for trying to do something different. It's going to be tough for him, though. He's played at a different level. The game that he's been playing, the kind of the way it's played in different countries, it's very different from the Premier League. Vilca's gone and sort of bulked up quite a lot in the last few weeks, and you'd hope that when he goes to Doncaster, he'll have a really good run of games and manage to impose himself on that league, and then he can kick on. But we saw with Adam Armstrong, he had a few really good loan spells in League One and the Championship, and even then, does he get trusted to kick on? It feels to me like it's low risk, possibly big reward. Obviously, with Munez, it's an 18-month loan, which is very strange as well. But it has to be around the first team squad by kind of the end of the season, or it feels like we've got another 6 months after that. It feels like if he's not around the first team squad by the end of the season, and he's nowhere near by kind of time when the FA Cup third round comes, then where is he? What's the point in having him? For the under 23s, we saw last season a load of players brought in, always interesting players like Ludwig Franchiletti. His name escapes me, but Alison Maxim's friend, Florentine, what his name is now, again came in free at the end of the season. It's very difficult to come into a first team, to come into a Premier League club and part of the first team squad. So temper my expectations. I've seen a lot of players coming in, Kevin and Babu, lads brought in, in similar moves who don't make it, and it's very rare that they do. Ayoze Perez is one who I can think of who did make it, but very few of them do.
And of course, not helped as well, I guess, with constant changing of coaches and management at the under-23s. Gary Caldwell, he was always set to apparently go out, but he has gone, and it's, we've seen Chris Hogg go just before the start of the season as well. But some of that's out of Newcastle's control, I guess. But hopefully Steve Harper and his role can come in and sort all that out. Final question then, Mark, just sum up the transfer window for Newcastle United.
Deflating, but kind of expected, I think, is probably the thing. Look, Willock was a great signing, and I'm really pleased that he's at the club, and I'm really pleased he's there on a permanent basis. I think they needed to do more, and they needed to find a way to do more to keep their heads above water. And I think what it feels like really is that it's very, it feels like it's more of the same. And until we get a resolution with the takeover one way or the other, and we get new owners in, it's going to be like this. And I think that's why when Rafa left a couple of years ago, it felt like that. If they did change manager and brought somebody else in who changed kind of the feeling around the football club, which they could do, then we'd have some different conversations. But I think we know now their approach, the way that they feel about a lot of things, and I think we know that it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult this season to really muster a lot of enthusiasm unless they start to put some results together. Otherwise it's going to be a long, hard season.
Yep, just another one. But then what's another year for Newcastle United fans here?
Well, we can hope. You never know. But there's a reason why they finished in a similar position the last few years. It's unfortunate because that's kind of their level at the moment. And hoping for anything different, it feels a little bit like a long shot. We've just got to hope that things like the 1892 appeal, stuff like that, actually comes to fruition. We see some movement on things like that, or maybe even the change of ownership, and then we can maybe look to a brighter future.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. It starts with a win against Manchester United and continues with a win against Leeds, and so
it may do.
So on. Fingers crossed, because we don't need to fear Ronaldo. We have a preview with John Gibson later this week, looking ahead to that Man United game. I'm sure you guys will want to tune in for that one. In the meantime, head over to chroniclelive.co.uk to keep updated with all the latest Newcastle United news. Thank you for watching and listening later on the podcast channel.